This is Recipe for Sleep, a podcast where we dust off very old cookbooks and let them lull us into dreamland. We'd love for you to join our community at banksalt.com, where I share my own recipes and stories. I'm Erin Brindley, a chef and storyteller. It's the holiday season, and I think I found the perfect cookbook to help us through the longest nights. It's not Christmas-themed at all, but it reminds me of the Icelandic tradition, bear with me while I try to pronounce it, jolabokaflod, which translates to Yule book flood. On Christmas Eve, everyone gives one another the gift of books and spends the rest of the evening reading. There is something so quiet and soothing about the idea of cozying up under a blanket on a dark night, reading silently with people you love, each in your own world, but together. As I was looking through all the old cookbooks trying to find the perfect, seasonally themed one to read you to sleep, I found Books and My Food, a curious cookbook written by a pair of friends. There are 365 recipes, one for each day of the year, coupled with a literary quote, primarily from English authors like Jane Austen and Charles Dickens. The recipes are barely recipes at all, and I think they read a little like poems. We'll spend the next few weeks in our own little English jolabokaflod. So turn the lights out, put away anything you were doing, and snuggle deep into your sweet covers. Imagine the kitchen of your mind. There are 2 cupboards there. Yesterday's cupboard, for all the things that have already happened that your mind just wants to chew on. And tomorrow's cupboard, for all the things that you're going to do, or what's going to happen later. It is time to put everything away in those cupboards. Imagine closing each one. You made it to this cozy, quiet time of day where there's nothing to do but listen to me read you old cookbooks until you drift off to sleep. Books and My Food, literary quotations and original recipes for every day in the year. By Elizabeth Luther Carey and Annie M. Jones. New York, Road and Haskins, 1904. Preface. It is impossible to read English novels without realizing how important a part food plays in the mental as in the physical life of the Englishman. The sentimental Anglo-Saxon soul goes out to its roast beef and pudding, to its port and ale, with much the same greeting it gives to blue violets and Devon cowslips. The associations that cluster about special dishes are not lightly to be dismissed. Perhaps no writer of another nation could have produced a poem difficult for the least emotional to read without tears, the theme of which should be a favorite soup at a famous restaurant. And if some of us have inherited from transcendental ancestors a species of contempt towards this gross and material affection for the food that gives us life, shares our nationality, and is the intimate of our homes, we may profitably remember the spirit of domesticity and hospitality which makes such an affection possible. It was before Emerson's second and longer visit to England that he wrote against our being the friend of our friends' buttons. Before he returned from that memorable second visit, he wrote to his wife that if an Englishman were to visit her, she must build a fire in the guest room and give him bread and wine at bedtime. For should an Englishman go cold, he said, it would chill his own bones. And should he be hungry, he himself would be hungry all his life. So great had been the hospitality of the English toward him. In making up this collection of recipes suggested by quotations, chiefly from English novelists and poets, Our idea has been not to provide bohemian fare for our readers, or give them unfamiliar and unrelishable diet, but to show what a varied list might be gathered from the works of well-known writers, of dishes, most of them equally well-known, and all of them good if properly prepared. The recipes for more characteristically English cookery are taken from English sources. One little cookbook, undated but apparently more than a century old, has furnished some excellent recipes, not one of which has failed in the trying. We cannot do better than send out this result of what may seem to the serious-minded a somewhat whimsical effort to combine intellectual and bodily sustenance, with Stevenson's envoy to Underwood's. Go, little book, and wish to all flowers in the garden, meat in the hall. Elizabeth Luther Carey. January 1st. The wedding cake, which had been a great distress to him, was all eaten up. His own stomach could bear nothing rich, and he could never believe other people to be different than himself. Jane Austen, Emma. Although wedding cake can hardly be recommended to invalids, I once heard of it curing a severe attack of indigestion, a statement the verification of which I leave to the skeptical. The following rule has descended from generation to generation of a long-lived family. 12 eggs, 1 pound of butter, 1 pound of flour, 1 pound of citron, 3 pounds of raisins, 3 pounds of currants, 1.5 pounds of brown sugar, a pint of molasses, half a pint of brandy, a teaspoonful of saleratus, 1 ounce of mace, 1 ounce of cinnamon, half an ounce of cloves, 1/4 ounce of allspice, 2 grated nutmegs. Cook 4 hours in a slow oven, covering the top with paper after the first hour. January 2nd. Lobster patties, rissoles, and 2 things with French names. Charles Reade. It is never too late to mend. Lobster alone is good, but lobster with mushrooms is the perfect union of harmonious flavors. Cut the lobster meat into small pieces. Do not chop it. Cut 6 large mushrooms into quarters. Dust them with paprika and salt, and pour on them a glass of sherry. Make a rich cream sauce of butter, flour, and cream, not milk. After it thickens, put in the pieces of lobster and mushroom, and pour in the sherry from which they have been taken, after they have cooked half an hour in the cream sauce. Do not allow the mixture to boil after adding the sherry. Pour it into hot patty shells and serve at once. January 3rd. That vin de Madère which accompanied the potage à la bisque would have contented an American. Lord Lytton, Parisians. For an oyster bisque that would content even a Parisian, add to a quart of chicken stock a stalk of celery, an onion, and a dozen clams. Cook until the celery is very tender, then strain and add to the stock a pint of milk and a pint of cream, both heated. Thicken with a tablespoonful of butter and 2 of flour rubbed together, and season with salt and paprika. 10 minutes before serving, add 35 oysters and let them merely cook through. January 4th. Well, that is intelligible, said Lady Selina Farrell, looking at her neighbor as she crumbled her dinner roll. Mrs. Humphrey Ward, Marcella. Dinner rolls are made as follows. Add to a pint of milk, scalded and cooled, a tablespoonful of melted butter, a teaspoonful of salt, half a cake of compressed yeast, dissolved in a very little lukewarm water, and 6 cups of flour. Mix into sponge and cover. When light, pull off pieces about the size of a large egg. Knead each of these into a smooth ball. Then roll between the palms of hands into a long roll about the size of a finger. Place close together in a biscuit pan, and when light, bake 15 minutes in a hot oven. January 5th. Dost think because thou art virtuous, there shall be no more cakes and ale? Shakespeare, Twelfth Night. For good little nut cakes, cream half a cupful of butter and 1.5 cups of sugar. Add the yolks of 2 eggs and beat all together. Sift 2 cupfuls of flour into which has been stirred 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Add to the butter, sugar, and eggs 1 cupful of milk, and then the flour. At the last, stir in 1 cupful of chopped pecan or hickory nuts, and fold in lightly the whites of the eggs beaten to a stiff froth. Bake in patty pan, ice, and sprinkle chopped nuts thickly over the icing. January 6th. Said he, "Upon this dainty cod, how bravely I shall sup." Hood, Poems. Croquettes of salt codfish are a pleasant variation of the familiar codfish cake. Make a thick cream sauce. Shred into it 1 pound of salt codfish, shredded with the fingers after it has soaked 2 hours in warm water. Add a dash of red pepper. Do not cook the fish in the sauce, but allow the mixture to get cold and firm. Then shape into croquettes. Dip each in beaten eggs, then fine cracker crumbs, and fry in very hot fat. January 6th. Do daily soups your dinners introduce? Gay. The standby for soup is a simple consommé, which may be multitudinously varied. Cut up 2 pounds of lean raw meat, beef or veal, and add 1 cupful of cold roast beef cut into pieces. Put over the fire with a cracked knuckle of veal, 4 quarts of cold water, 2 onions, 1 carrot, 2 stalks of celery, 6 peppercorns, a spoonful of salt, 6 cloves, and a few herbs. Cook slowly all day. Strain when cold, skim off the fat. Add the white and shell of 2 eggs. Bring to a boil and boil 10 minutes. Strain through a cloth. January 8th. Mrs. Elton was growing impatient to name the day and settle with Mr. Weston as to pigeon pies and cold lamb. Jane Austen, Emma. For an excellent pigeon pie for a small family, singe and draw 3 birds. Split them down the back. Wipe with clean cloth, but do not wash. Fry 6 slices of pork fat and brown pigeons in the pork fat. Then put them into a deep baking dish. Slice a small onion, brown in the hot fat, and add a pint of stock and a tablespoonful of flour. Stir until slightly thick, then strain over the pigeons. Cover them tightly and cook for 2 hours in a moderate oven. Remove the cover and place it with 1 of pie crust. Bake until brown. January 9th. The mushrooms show his wit. Pope. For the large, highly flavored and substantial mushrooms, there is no better way of cooking than broil them. Carefully wash, peel, and dry the mushrooms. Pour over them a little melted butter, not hot, and put them on ice for 20 minutes. When chilled, broil upon an oyster broiler, first on one side, then turn. About 10 minutes should be sufficient to cook them. Serve upon delicately toasted bread. Season the last thing with salt and pepper, a few drops of lemon juice, and a bit of butter on each mushroom. January 10th. Mrs. Alexander Trott sat down to a fried sole, Maintenon cutlet, Madeira, and sundries. Charles Dickens, Sketches by Boz. If you ask for sole in the American market, you will get flounder. But the mode of preparation is the same for both. To fry the fish acceptably, first scrape it, cut off the head and fins, wash in cold water, and wipe dry. Sprinkle with salt, dip twice in beaten egg and breadcrumbs, and fry brown in boiling lard or dripping. Serve with it on a separate dish a mayonnaise dressing in which a tablespoonful of capers has been stirred. For frying fish in a pan of deep fat and a basket are desirable. Butter should not be used, and oil is better than lard or drippings. January 11th. Of all the dishes that the ingenuity of man has invented, the truffled turkey or capon is the most delicious. On this point, there is no difference of opinion. Dr. Austen Flint, Essays. Dr. Flint has not only given the weight of his authority to the truffled turkey as a gastronomic delicacy, but has given a valuable suggestion to its preparation. It is not sufficient merely to fill a turkey with truffles and cook it, he says. The art is to disseminate the flavor throughout the muscular tissue of the bird. The truffles should be of the best quality. They should be carefully prepared and seasoned, and the bird should be stuffed for days before it is cooked. In this way, the truffle has a fair chance. He further adds that so admirable a dish as the wild turkey of this country, truffé, should be complemented by having the preceding dishes arranged with special reference to it, that the palate may not be cloyed with ordinary flavors before reaching it. January 12th. An olive, capers, or some better salad. Ben Jonson. Nothing is better than celery salad. Cut fine white celery in lengths of 1.5 inches or 2 inches, splitting the ends so that when thrown in ice water for a half hour, they will curl back. When ready to use, mix with the celery a large tablespoon of mayonnaise dressing, heap lightly in a salad bowl, and put over the top more mayonnaise through which has been stirred a tablespoonful of capers. A border of stoned olives or pomolas is not only an attractive garnish, but an improvement to the flavor. January 13th. Butter ill melted, the commonest of kitchen failures, puts me beside my tenor. Charles Lamb. Melted butter, or butter sauce, for fish is made by melting in a saucepan 1 tablespoonful of good butter, and as it melts, stirring in the same quantity of flour. When thoroughly blended, pour in a cup of boiling water. Season with a saltspoonful of salt, a dash of pepper, a few drops of onion juice, a pinch of made English mustard, a teaspoonful each of capers and mixed cucumber pickle, and finally add slowly a well-beaten egg. As soon as the egg is all in, take from fire. January 14th. There was a large, substantial, cold-boiled leg of mutton at the bottom of the table, shaking like blancmange. Charles Dickens, Sketches by Boz. For chocolate blancmange, take half a package of gelatin, dissolved in a cupful of cold water. Stir into it a pint of hot milk. Half milk and half cream is better, and a scant half cup of sugar. Add 4 heaping tablespoonfuls of chocolate, rubbed smooth with a little milk. Stir over the fire until the mixture is about to boil. When nearly cold, flavor with a teaspoonful of vanilla and turn into a mold wet with cold water. A boiled custard or whipped cream served with this is a decided improvement. January 15th. A little strong gravy soup lubricated and gelatinized with a little tapioca. Charles Reade, It is never too late to mend. If you have 3/4 of an hour's notice to make an emergency soup, you can have one answering the above description. Cook in a quart of boiling water a cupful of pearl tapioca. Dissolve in a cup of hot water half a dozen bouillon capsules or an equal amount of beef extract. Strain and add to the tapioca with a cupful of canned tomatoes, a little chopped onion. Season rather highly. Put into the tureen small squares of bread browned in the oven. Some cooks also put into the tureen a well-beaten egg, and on this pour the hot soup. January 16th. Then came a dish of meat, nature unknown, but supposed to be miscellaneous, singularly chopped up with crumbs of bread, seasoned uniquely, though not unpleasantly, and baked into a mold. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. An old way of making English meat pie is to take finely chopped cold beef, put in a deep baking dish a layer of the meat, strew lightly with breadcrumbs, season highly with salt, pepper, butter, and a few drops of onion juice. Repeat the process till the dish is full or your meat used up. Pour over it a hot cup of stock or gravy, or lacking these, hot water with a teaspoonful of butter melted in it. On top a good layer of breadcrumbs should be put, seasoned and dotted with butter. Cover and bake half an hour. Remove the cover and brown. January 17th. At this moment, Mrs. Have's servant appeared with a smoking dish of bacon and greens. Thackeray, Catherine. A novel but very desirable variation on the old dish of bacon and greens is often served in one household to the approval of family and guest. Carefully prepare and cook spinach in the usual way. Season it with salt and pepper, and 2 or 3 tablespoonfuls of cream, or rather less of butter, after you have drained and chopped it. Fry very crisp, thin slices of bacon and lay thickly over the dish of spinach. The combination is appetizing. January 18th. Old Stella placed a cold fowl upon the table and followed with a savory omelette. Hawthorne, The Marble Fawn. For a winter morning there is no better omelette than one made savory with sausage, which should be partly cooked, skinned if the sausage links are used, and minced fine. Then break and lightly beat to 6 eggs. Have a small tablespoonful of butter hot in a pan. Slip in the eggs. Shake gently in one direction. When set, add the minced sausage, fold the omelette, and serve without delay. January 19th. At the top, a fried liver and bacon were seen. At the bottom was tripe in a swinging tureen. Goldsmith. Dip slices of bacon in ice water and put into a hot pan. When it begins to curl, add 2 or 3 slices of onion and cook 2 or 3 minutes longer, being careful that the bacon does not get too hard. Take out the bacon and keep hot. Remove the onion from the pan and lay in the slices of liver, which have been seasoned with salt and pepper and dredged with flour. Cook rather slowly till brown and tender. Too rapid cooking dries and hardens it. Lay the liver on a dish with the bacon. Stir into the gravy a tablespoonful of butter, rubbed to as much brown flour. Season with tomato ketchup, or stewed tomatoes. Pour over the liver. January 20th. It was he who proposed the bowl of punch, which was brewed and drunk in Mrs. Betty's room, and which Gumbo concocted with exquisite skill. Thackeray, The Virginians. For rum punch, take 2 large, fresh lemons with rough skins and some lumps of sugar. Rub the sugar over the lemons until it absorbed all the yellow parts of the skins. Then put into a bowl these lumps and as many more as the lemons will probably require. Squeeze the lemon juice on the sugar and blend sugar and juice thoroughly. Much of the excellence of this punch depends on the mixing processes being well performed. Add 2 quarts boiling water and stir until almost cool. Then add from 1 pint to 1 quart of rum as the punch is desired weak or strong. Mix again very thoroughly. January 21st. Bless the girls! A nice fresh steak was frizzling on the gridiron for our supper. Thackeray, The Fatal Boots. Use a hip bone steak. Have the bone cut entirely out and the steak pressed together to form a round slice. It should be at least 2 inches thick. Cook over a clear fire 7 minutes to a side. This will give a very rare steak. When done, place on a hot platter and cut 3 or 4 deep gashes in one side. Fill the gashes with a dressing made of 4 teaspoonfuls of French mustard, 2 or 3 drops of Tabasco sauce, a small teaspoonful of salt, and butter the size of an egg. Do this quickly that the steak may not have time to cool, and send to the table at once. January 22nd. Leek to the Welsh. To Dutchmen, butter steer. Of Irish swains, potato is the cheer. Gay. Poem. No Irish swain, but a clever Frenchman invented the potato soufflé. To a well-beaten cupful of mashed potato, add the yolks of 3 eggs thoroughly beaten. Season with salt and pepper and a tablespoonful of melted butter. Whip in slowly a cup of milk, or half milk and half cream, and finally the frothed whites of the eggs. Put into a baking dish and cover till it rises well. Then remove the cover and brown. Serve at once or it will fall. January 23rd. Take the nuts from the fire with the dog's foot. Taylor. To blanch and salt almonds, put them into boiling water and let them stand 5 minutes. Then throw them into cold water and rub off the loosened skin. Put in a bowl, allowing each cupful of nuts a tablespoonful of olive oil or melted butter. Stir the almonds that they may be well coated. Let them stand for an hour and then sprinkle with salt, a dessertspoonful for each cup of the nuts, spread on a baking pan, and put into a moderately hot oven. Let them cook for about 15 minutes, stirring several times that they may brown evenly. Take them out when they are a delicate brown. January 24th. I was never much of an oyster eater, nor can I relish them in naturalibus as some do, but require a quantity of sauces, lemons, cayenne peppers, bread and butter, and so forth to render them palatable. Thackeray, The Fitzbootle Papers. Many people accustomed to the ordinary oyster of commerce secretly agree with Thackeray, hence the popularity of the oyster cocktail. The sauces, peppers, and so forth are frequently overdone, however, a simple mixture bringing out the flavor of the oyster instead of destroying it. The following is acceptable to a moderately initiated palate. To 6 oysters, add the juice of half a lemon, 2 drops of Tabasco sauce, 2 teaspoonfuls of homemade catsup, and the oyster juice. Place the mixture where it will be thoroughly chilled, but do not put ice into it. Some people like a teaspoonful of horseradish added, but this coarsens the flavor. January 25th. Will ye have fresh cheese and cream? Herrick, Poems. An old-fashioned method of serving pot cheese still obtains in one family where ancient traditions are still held in special honor. Mix a pot cheese with rich cream enough to make it soft. Add to it a tablespoonful of chopped Spanish onion. Season with a liberal sprinkling of red pepper and eat sans peur et sans reproche. January 26th. There were great, round, pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts, shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen. Charles Dickens, Christmas Carol. To make the peculiarly luscious dessert known as Nesselrode pudding, you must boil 3 cupfuls of these jolly old gentlemen. When tender, remove their shells and brown skins and mash them into a pulp. Cut a pound of French candied fruit into small pieces and pour over them a glassful of sherry. Mix a cupful of water with 2 cupfuls of sugar and boil 15 minutes. Into this syrup, stir the beaten yolks of 4 eggs. Return it to the fire and let it reach the boiling point, and remove and beat it until it is cold. Add a pint of whipped cream, the nuts, fruit and wine, and a teaspoonful of vanilla. Freeze in an ice cream freezer, then pack and leave for 2 or 3 hours. January 27th. Bearing in one hand a most enormous sandwich, while in the other he supported a goodly-sized case bottle, to both of which he applied himself with intense relish. Charles Dickens, Pickwick Papers. A club sandwich has a roistering sound to the feminine ear, but in reality its composition is of the daintiest. 2 thin slices of delicately browned toast. Between them, a thin slice of carefully broiled ham, the fat crisp and brown, a thicker slice of the breast of a chicken, and a lettuce leaf touched with mayonnaise. January 28th. Among the viands were expected to be found a small assortment of cheesecakes and tarts. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. For cheesecakes, make a pie crust of half a cup of butter, 2 cups of flour, and a tablespoonful of ice water. Roll out very thin, rolling into the dough half a cup of grated cheese, preferably Old English. Cut into fancy shapes, sprinkle with grated cheese, and bake in a quick oven till a delicate brown. January 29th. Hippocrates and Galen, he cried. 'Tis a soup à vin, the restorative of restoratives. Charles Reade, The Cloister and the Hearth. For a soup à vin, it is only necessary to take a good consommé, and when ready to heat for use, put in a dozen whole cloves, as many whole allspice, and a few pieces of cinnamon tied in a thin muslin bag. When ready to pour into the tureen, remove the spice bag and add a cupful of port or Madeira wine. If neither of these wines is at hand, sherry will answer, though not quite as good for the purpose. January 30th. Feed him with apricots and dewberries, with purple grapes, green figs. Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream. For a delicate fig pudding, choose good pulled figs, soak overnight in enough claret to cover them, and in the morning simmer gently on the side of the range, adding enough claret to take the place of that absorbed by the figs. Sweeten very slightly. Let them cook till the skins are tender. Set away to cool and serve covered with whipped cream sweetened and flavored with sherry. A few candied cherries on the cream add both to the flavor and appearance of this good and unusual dessert, but are not necessary. January 31st. Simplicity talks of pies. Willis, Love in a Cottage. A rich lemon pie, sadly unfitted for a cottage income, is made by creaming half a pound of butter with a pound of sugar, beating in the yolks of 6 eggs, the juice and grated peel of 2 lemons, a gill of brandy, and the whites of 4 eggs previously whipped stiff. Bake with a bottom crust only. When done, cover with a meringue made of whites of 2 eggs, 2 tablespoonfuls of sugar, and a little lemon juice. Return to the oven until the meringue is a very light brown. Eat cold the day it is baked. February 1st. Well saffroned was that barley soup. Robert Browning, Farishta's Fancies. Boil 2 pounds lean veal in 1 quart of water. Add to it 1/4 pound of pearl barley and boil until it can be rubbed through a sieve. Add a quart of warm milk or white stock. Bring to the boiling point. Season with salt and serve. This is a very nourishing soup or puree. February 2nd. Now if you're ready, oysters, dear, we can begin to feed. Lewis Carroll, Through the Looking Glass. To prepare oysters for frying, choose small, fat ones of good flavor in place of those larger and more tasteless. Drain, wipe, and dip each one in highly seasoned cracker crumbs, then in beaten egg, and again in the crumbs. Set away for an hour or more in a cold place. Fry a few at a time in boiling lard. February 3rd. A pair of boiled fowls with tongue and etceteras were displayed at the top, and a fillet of veal at the bottom. Charles Dickens, Sketches by Boz. For fricasseed chicken, cut 2 fowls into joints. Season them with salt and pepper, and dip each one in flour. Put them in a saucepan and cover with boiling water. Let them cook very gently for about 2 hours or until very tender. When they are done, put 3 tablespoonfuls of butter in a frying pan. Add the same amount of flour, rub smooth, then add the water in which the chickens have been boiled, which should not amount to more than a quart. After the gravy has boiled up, add a cup of rich cream and season with salt, white pepper, and a little cayenne. Just before removing from the fire, add an egg well beaten. Pour over the chicken, which should be laid on toast or soda biscuits cut in half. February 4th. Tom, said Maggie, as they sat on the boughs of an elder tree eating their jam puffs, shall you run away tomorrow? George Eliot, Mill on the Floss. Puff paste, that bugbear of the inexperienced cook, is in reality easy of accomplishment. Chop 3/4 of a cup of butter into a pint of sifted flour, having the ingredients and the chopping bowl thoroughly chilled. Pour in half a cup of ice water and mix with the chopping knife to a stiff paste. Turn out on a floured pastry board and roll quickly into a thin sheet. Dredge with flour, dot with lard, fold in 3 thicknesses and roll out again. Repeat the process 3 times, then set the sheet of paste in the icebox near the ice overnight. In the morning, divide it into as many pieces as you wish to have pies and roll each piece to fit the pie plate. For jam puffs, fill with jam after baking. February 5th. We have 5 eggs. No meat for you, dear, but enough bread and butter, some honey, and plenty of coffee. George Meredith, The Amazing Marriage. Boiled eggs with cream sauce make an excellent breakfast dish. Boil the eggs hard, remove the shell, and cut in halves. Put in a warm covered dish, and pour over them a sauce made by heating a cupful and a half of milk, part cream is better, stirring into it 2 tablespoonfuls of butter and 1 of flour rubbed together, Season with salt and paprika and cook for 10 minutes until thick and smooth. A teaspoonful of curry powder added to the sauce is an improvement, or a piece of onion cooked in the butter may be used as a flavoring. February 6th. That gentleman had in his hand a cabbage. He was proving to the farmer that this plant is more nutritious than the potato. Charles Reade, Clouds and Sunshine. If the gentleman had argued thus of cauliflower, which has been called a cabbage with a college education, he would have been quite correct. For in cultivation, the cauliflower has gained in nutritive importance. Boil in salted hot water till tender but not soft. Divide the flowers. Put in a buttered dish a layer of the cauliflower seasoned with salt, pepper, and butter, then a sprinkling of grated cheese and one of breadcrumbs. Moisten with milk each layer. End with a layer of dried breadcrumbs liberally dotted with butter. Cover and bake for a half hour. Then remove cover and brown. February 7th. The mustard is too hot a little. Shakespeare, Taming of the Shrew. For those who find the English mustard moistened simply with vinegar too hot and crude, a very pleasant condiment may be made by rubbing into 2 tablespoonfuls of the ground mustard, a tablespoonful of olive oil, a saltspoonful each of celery and black pepper, a teaspoonful each of salt and sugar, and enough vinegar to make it of the right consistency to pour. For some tastes, it is an improvement to rub the bowl in which the ingredients are mixed with onion or garlic. February 8th. Betty J. scented the boiling of Squire. Cass's hams. George Eliot, Silas Marner. The rules for the simplest dishes are often the hardest to find in cookbooks. The right way to boil a ham is simplicity itself. Soak the ham all night after scrubbing it hard with a stiff brush kept for the purpose. Boil in a soup digester if possible, as such a vessel admits of cooking at a slow, even temperature. Start it in cold water, and after it comes to the boiling point, put the kettle back where it will simmer gently. 15 minutes to a pound is the length of time usually given for the boiling, but an 8-pound ham really requires at least 4 hours of slow boiling to reach the perfection of tenderness. When it is done, either allow it to stand 24 hours in the water before skinning it, or skin it as soon as it is cooked. Sprinkle it over with brown sugar, stick into it a few whole cloves at sparse intervals, and bake in a hot oven until nicely brown. Serve with a champagne sauce, which is merely a good brown sauce flavored with a glass of champagne. It is delicious to eat hot. February 9th. The Venosta ran on in praise of Paris and the Parisians, of Laurier and his soirée, and the pistachio ice. Lord Lytton, Parisians. A simple ice cream is made of 1 quart of cream, half a pint or more of milk, 1 cup of sugar, and a tablespoonful of vanilla extract. Scald the cream and milk, add the sugar, and when cold, the flavoring. 1/2 cup of pistachio nuts and a 1/4 cup of almonds, blanched, chopped, and pounded into a paste. Freeze. February 10th. Set your mind on curly fat rashers of bacon and sweet-smelling coffee, toast, hotcakes, marmalade, and damson jam. George Meredith, The Egoist. Very good and quickly made hotcakes are prepared by beating 1 egg very light, stirring in a cupful of flour, 1/2 cupful of milk, and 2 tablespoonfuls of sugar, beating them briskly until light, and then stirring in quickly a good teaspoonful of baking powder. Bake in muffin tins for 20 minutes in a quick oven. This will be enough for half a dozen muffins. February 11th. What had ye till your dinner? I forget. A chop, likely. I think it was. Charles Reade, Peg Woofington. When the broiler is unavailable and the chafing dish or frying pan must serve your need for cooking chops, you will feel no regrets if you heat the pan very hot. Then put in a lump of butter, about a tablespoonful for 4 chops. When the butter is melted, add the chops, nicely trimmed. Cover and cook 2 minutes. Turn them, season with salt and butter, and when they are a light golden brown, they are done to perfection. This will be in 4 or 5 minutes. February 12th. And salmon. Perhaps salmon is next to the flounder. Thackeray. A salmon loaf is a dressy dish to set before a lunch party and may be made in the preceding day. Pick cold salmon into flakes. Mix 2 cupfuls with the yolks of 2 hard-boiled eggs, a tablespoonful of minced parsley, 2 of lemon juice, and 1 of capers. Season highly. Pour a cupful of veal or chicken stock, heated, over half a box of gelatin. Stir in the fish. Decorate a buttered mold with slices of eggs and olives. Pour in the mixture and let it get perfectly cold. Garnish with lettuce leaves. February 13th. Moore eats like 3 men. They are always making sago or tapioca or something good for him. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. To make a delicious sago cream, soak a cupful of sago in 2 cups of cold water till it takes up all the water. Scald a quart of milk and stir the sago into it. Remove from the fire to do it. When almost cold, beat it all up from the bottom. Stir in 2 tablespoonfuls of sugar, creamed with 1 of butter, and the yolks of 5 eggs. When well mixed, add the whipped whites of the eggs. Pour into small molds. Bake and eat cold with soft custard or wine sauce. February 14th. The last of Lent was sponging up Shrovetide's pancakes. Charles Lamb. To make the regular Shrovetide pancakes, soak in a quart of milk 2 cupfuls of dry breadcrumbs, free from crusts. When the crumbs are thoroughly moistened, beat in 3 eggs, whipped light, a tablespoonful of melted butter, a teaspoonful of salt, and a tablespoonful of sugar. When well mixed, stir in half a cupful of twice sifted flour, in which is mixed half a teaspoonful of baking powder. Cook on a hot, lightly greased griddle and serve with butter and sugar and ground cinnamon. February 15th. First catch your clams. Along the ebbing edges of sailing coves, you'll find the precious wedges. W.A. Croffle. For a delicate but very good clam chowder, take 1 pint of clam juice, 40 clams chopped very fine, 8 potatoes peeled, parboiled, and chopped into coarse pieces, 2 small onions sliced, 1 quart of tomatoes. Cook all together for 3 hours. Then add half a cup of butter and a cup of flour rubbed together and a quart of milk. Cook half an hour longer. The addition of a bunch of celery, chopped fine, improves the flavor. This makes a large quantity, and half the amounts given will be enough for 8 persons. February 16th. I am a great eater of beef, and I believe that does harm to my wit. Shakespeare, Twelfth Night. Most English people are great eaters of beef, and cook it in a large variety of ways. A beefsteak pie is better known across the water than here. It should be made of cold broiled beefsteak, cut in thin slices across the grain. If any bit of the outside is burned, discard it, as it will make the whole dish bitter. Sprinkle the pieces of beef with flour, pepper, and salt. Add a chopped onion and 2 cupfuls of gravy made of melted butter, flour, and water, the flour rubbed smoothly into the butter, and boiling water added. Bake in a pudding dish with a biscuit crust. February 17th. My lord, I hope you are pepper-proof. Swift. Cut off the stem ends of sweet green peppers and remove the seeds. Stuff with a mince of tongue, veal, chicken, or lamb, mixed with an equal quantity of breadcrumbs and seasoned with salt, butter, and a bit of onion juice or tomato. Put the peppers close enough together in a baking dish so that they will stand upright. Cover the bottom of the dish with stock or water enriched with a large spoonful of butter. Cook in a moderate oven for an hour. Remove and add flour and butter to the liquid in the pan. Pour over the peppers and serve. February 18th. There is a physiognomical character in the taste for food. C holds that a man cannot have a pure mind who refuses apple dumplings. Charles Lamb. To make boiled apple dumplings, pare tart apples of good flavor and remove the cores. Fill the holes with butter, sugar, and a little cinnamon. Have ready a dough made of 2 tablespoonfuls of butter chopped into a quart of sifted flour, into which has been well mixed a heaping teaspoonful of baking powder and a little salt. Wet with 2 cupfuls of milk to make a soft dough. Unroll to a thickness of 1/4 of an inch. Cut into squares large enough to readily encase the apples. Put an apple in each and fold together, pinching the edges tight. Tie up in small cloths, not too tight, and boil an hour, never allowing the water to stop boiling. February 19th. The greengrocer and his wife then arranged upon a table a boiled leg of mutton, hot, with caper sauce, turnips, and potatoes. Charles Dickens, Pickwick Papers. With turnips and boiled leg of mutton, it is well to serve a dish of browned potatoes. Cut into strips of convenient size 6 cold, mashed potatoes. Dip first into melted butter, then into beaten egg. Lay the strips carefully in a buttered pan. Cook in a hot oven for 12 minutes. February 20th. I had to eat boiled mutton every day. Entre nous, I abominated it. But I never complained. I swallowed it. Thackeray, Roundabout Papers. If mutton must be boiled, it should be served rare. Put it into a kettle of water that is boiling hard. Cook fast for 15 minutes to keep the juices in the meat. Then draw the kettle to one side of the range and let the contents cook slowly 10 minutes to a pound of meat. Add to the liquor a stalk of celery, a minced onion, a sprig of parsley, chopped, a sprig of mint, and a carrot. When the meat is taken up, it should be washed over with butter. Strain the stock, season with flour and pepper, thicken with flour, stir in a lump of butter and a tablespoonful of capers, and serve as a gravy. February 21st. Some bring a capon, some a rural cake, some nuts, some apples. Some that think they make the better cheeses, bring them. Ben Jonson. Nuts and cheese have recently become a favorite combination. Form cream cheese into small balls and press half a walnut meat on each side, first seasoning the cheese with a little paprika or with chopped green pepper. Arrange the balls on lettuce leaves or else on the tender white central leaves of the chicory plant. Garnish with shredded red peppers and olives and pour a French dressing over all. February 22nd. She sent him for a pie she professed to have fallen in love with at the corner of the street. Charles Reade, Peg Woofington. One of the several kinds of cake, known as Washington pie, is made by creaming together half a cupful of butter and 2 cupfuls of sugar, adding the beaten yolks of 4 eggs and a cupful of water, beating well together, and stirring in 3 cupfuls of flour in which has been mixed 2 tablespoonfuls of baking powder. At the last, flavor with the grated rind of a lemon and a little nutmeg, and fold into the whites of the eggs. Bake in layers. Put together with a filling made of yolk and an egg beaten up with a cupful of sugar, the grated peel and juice of a lemon, and 3 tart apples grated. Cook in a double boiler till scalding hot, stirring constantly. When cold, put between the layers of cake. It is excellent eaten fresh. Give him 3 ratafias, soaked in a dessert spoonful of cream. George Eliot, Mill on the Floss. Ratafia is a cordial made by blanching 2 ounces of peach and apricot kernels, bruising them, and putting them in a bottle with a pint of brandy. Set it aside for a month, then removing the kernels, add a cup of cold water in which has been dissolved half a pound of sugar. Strain through a cloth and seal. George Eliot's little ratafias are no doubt named for the custom of dipping macaroons or other small cakes in this liquor and serving them with custard. February 24th. By the way, we had half a dozen sardines while the dinner was getting ready, eating them with delicious bread and butter. Thackeray, Memorials of Gormandizing. A particularly delicious method of preparing sardines is to rub a half a dozen of them into a paste with the yolks of 3 hard-boiled eggs. Season with lemon juice. Place on squares of delicately toasted white bread, garnishing with watercress, which is the best of green salads to eat with sardines. February 25th. So long as there's pickled pork in the kitchen, they'll look in. Charles Reade, Propria que Maribus. For the occasions when an old-fashioned breakfast of fried mush is in demand, with its traditional accompaniment of fried pork, cut the slices of fat pork very thin, pour hot water over them, drain, plunge in ice water for a couple of minutes, and fry in a hot pan till crisp, or until they may be rolled in eggs and crumbs and fried in deep fat. February 26th. It was a memorable feast. I had soup, fish, meat, and pastry, and for the first time in my life, a glass of wine. George Meredith, Harry Richmond. To convert the commonplace codfish or halibut steak into a rather distinguished dish, the New Orleans method is to fry the steaks in oil, or part butter and part lard. Before they are quite done, take them out and add to the gravy in the pan 2 tablespoonfuls of flour, 1 of Worcestershire sauce, some ground cloves, nutmeg, half an onion, minced, a little thyme. Strain into it also half a pint of stewed tomatoes. Stir well, and when thoroughly blended, put in the fish and cook all together 3 or 4 minutes and serve immediately. February 27th. If you will but speak the word, I will make you a good syllabub. Walton, Complete Angler. The famous syllabub of Walton's native Stratfordshire was a lusty English product, as different from our airy nothings as were his simple rods and lines from the modern equipment of fancy rods and magnificent flies. It was made by putting into a bowl a pint of cider and a glass of brandy, a little nutmeg and sugar, and then pouring into it, from some height, a pint of warm milk. February 28th. Give him a sugar plum, if he is good. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. An easy and very good sugar plum, to make at home, requires 1 can of sweet condensed milk, 1½ cupfuls of brown sugar, a large tablespoonful of butter, a teaspoonful of vanilla, and ½ a pound of English walnuts. Boil 20 minutes, stirring steadily. Pour on buttered plates, and when nearly cold, cut in squares. Sweet dreams.